The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Every once in a while, Lewis, we have to start the show this way with a correction. Yesterday, I implied that Texas gubernatorial candidate Larry Secede Kilgore made up the word transvestism. As I immediately heard from any number of our viewers, they were compelled to tell me that is actually a word. So, Lewis, I apologize profusely. I will try to do better next time. He did not make up that word, but we do stand by our report that he is a dangerous, bigoted extremist. How's that for a correction, Lewis? Does that suffice?
I think that'll do just fine, yeah.
Pope Francis has been named Times Person of the Year just the day after, just hours after I spoke on this program about how I thought that his statements were starting to actually be significant in and of themselves, even if they weren't directly connected to a change in policy or doctrine from the Catholic Church. He has been named Times Person of the Year for 2013. Coming in second was Edward Snowden. Pope Francis is the first Jesuit pope, and Times managing editor Nancy Gibbs explained that he is a new voice of conscience. In his 9 months in office, she said, he has placed himself at the very center of the central conversations of our time about wealth and poverty, fairness and justice, transparency, modernity, globalization, the role of women, the nature of marriage, the temptations of power. When he kisses the face of a disfigured man or washes the feet of a Muslim woman, the image resonates far beyond the boundaries of the Catholic Church. Now, Vatican spokesman Federico Lombardi said, "The Holy Father is not looking to become famous or to receive honors, but if the choice of Person of the Year helps spread the message of the gospel, a message of God's love for everyone, he will certainly be happy about that." You know, Lewis, I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, the Pope does seem closer to an actual Christian, right? Not the absurd caricature of Christianity that's presented by the American right wing. He's irritating a lot of right wingers, which makes me think he may be doing something right. So that's positive, but there is a counter argument, which is number one, this is the 21st century. Religion may not be something that deserves a place of honor among the enlightened, so to speak. And the fact that this pope seems more progressive relative to other popes is still only relative, and it still leaves the Catholic Church far behind the modern world.
Yeah, that's true. And time again, well, excuse the pun, with Time's cover, popularity has something to do with it. You know, he is an incredibly popular person, and everyone knows who he is. And that is definitely factored into this. But I have to say, as far as popes go, I'm pleased with him so far, I guess, you know.
Yeah, it's like, and again, you're kind of hedging in this relativistic way. For being a pope, and given that the Catholic Church still has a whole list of problems, he's less bad than others have been. But then the question also has to be, Lewis, when we think about Times Person of the Year, who influenced the news more this year? Was it Pope Francis, or did Edward Snowden influence the news more? And I think that there could be a case there to be made for Edward Snowden, even though I've been clear on this program, Lewis. I am no cheerleader of Edward Snowden, given that, like I've said many times, he did not expose crimes. He exposed things maybe people think should be crimes, but I've become increasingly skeptical about Snowden's true motivations. It doesn't really matter, right? It's a question of who influenced news and conversation more, and Snowden did a lot of that.
He did, but is it, I don't know. I mean, among our circles, yes, that's definitely the case. But in this country as a whole, can we say that that is the case? I don't know.
Maybe not. Send me your thoughts about Pope Francis as Times Person of the Year. The country of Uruguay has become the first country to legalize marijuana. BBC is reporting this. The first country that has made it legal to grow, sell, and consume marijuana. There were 12 hours of debate. Senators gave the government-sponsored bill their historic final approval. The law will allow those who are registered and over 18 to buy up to 40 grams, or about an ounce and a half, of the drug a month. It's expected to take shape and actually start functioning in April. The government hopes this will help tackle drug cartels. Critics are saying it's going to expose more people to drug addiction. This is very interesting, Lewis, and there's a growing debate about drug policy in Latin America. That's number one. There's international criticism of this. The International Narcotics Control Board warned that this would be complete contravention to the provisions of the international drug treaties to which Uruguay is party. The price will be about $1 a gram, significantly cheaper than in the U.S., where prices average $8 to $17 a gram. I am fascinated right now by Uruguay and by the president, Jose Mujica. I was lucky enough to spend some time in Uruguay last summer, Lewis. The first time I visited, very interesting country, considered in at least the parts that are closer to the riverfront, very similar to Argentina in terms of some cultural elements, but certainly the northern and more rural parts of the country more differentiated. And I just think this is a great thing. Uruguay is a very small country, so we will see how this goes, and we'll see what we can deduce about how it would go in other countries based on what happens there, kind of taking into consideration that it is a very small country. What's your reaction to this?
I love this, David, and I think we are going to see lots of positive outcomes from it in the country, hopefully to set an example for the rest of the world.
We're going to keep following it. I'm very curious about your thoughts on the legalization for the first time in a country of the consumption, growing, and trade and sale of marijuana. Very, very interesting. And there's actually a chance I will get back to Uruguay this coming summer, Lewis. That's not necessarily breaking news, but certainly something I'll keep everybody apprised of. Another marijuana-related story. Plastic surgeon Dr. Anthony Yoon, who's a CNN contributor, says that he thinks smoking marijuana can lead to the condition colloquially known as man boobs, or gynecomastia, as it is known in the medical community. This is a condition that affects about 33 to 41% of men between age 25 and 45, more common during puberty, affecting 60% of 14-year-old boys. Most cases of this, Lewis, resolve spontaneously. Some don't, and they require, or at least are candidates for plastic surgery. And Dr. Anthony Yoon says that when he has patients come in, male patients, of course, with this issue, with this complaint, he will ask whether they smoke marijuana. And he says that based on his results, he started thinking there was actually something there. Now, animal studies have shown that the exposure to the active ingredient in marijuana can result in a decrease in testosterone levels, a reduction of testicular size, and abnormalities in the form and function of sperm. And in humans, the effects of marijuana on testosterone and estrogen aren't quite as clear. However, there have been a couple of different studies that look at the connection between cannabis and gynecomastia, and a 72 study says there is a connection. A 1977 study says the connection is unclear, and this is now something that numerous plastic surgeons are talking to their patients about. What do you think? What's your reaction?
I'm trying to think of anecdotal evidence of this, and I'm not coming up with anything. And it seems like if we're just learning this now, seems like something we should have known a long time ago, considering how prevalent this has been in our country, right?
You're right. Now, one person that emailed me, a couple people emailed me this article, and one of them said, remember all that racist fear-mongering to scare people into supporting the drug war? Is this maybe just another version of the same thing? Whoa, we've got to oppose marijuana being legal because you're going to get man boobs. And to that, I would say, if that is being done, it's very, very stupid, because even if I, as a non-consumer of marijuana, I could say, yeah, you know what? Man boobs is that's one reason not to smoke marijuana, but that doesn't make me think that it should be illegal and that we should disproportionately imprison minorities to prevent man boobs. It's just it would be a silly way to try to push the drug war.
definitely. I mean, in this case, I'm going to just assume that this doctor is unbiased and that we're getting his honest opinion here.
Yeah, if anything, if he has less patients as a result of this advice, he would actually make less money. So maybe that's a sign that he's just giving us his honest opinion. The bubonic plague has claimed 20 lives in Madagascar. This is very concerning, Lewis. The BBC is reporting that a village in Madagascar has been hit by a deadly outbreak of the bubonic plague, and medical experts on the island are confirming that the death count is 20 and possibly higher. The International Committee of the Red Cross is warning people from heading there now, and in October, we're already warning that Madagascar was at risk of a plague epidemic. The bubonic plague is transmitted to humans via fleas, usually coming from rats initially. So the fleas kind of transmitting it from rats to humans. It's also the same disease that used to be known as the Black Death, Lewis, where it killed 25 million people in Europe during the Middle Ages. It is very rare now. Last year, Madagascar did have 60 deaths from the plague, which is the world's highest number. A lot of these are being kind of blamed on or traced to the horrible prison conditions in Madagascar, where there are rats all over the place, incredibly cramped, horrible conditions, and that seems to be the source of some of these outbreaks. A lot of people, Lewis, didn't even think bubonic plague was a thing anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of scary to think about that it is still around, but luckily, it's usually in areas or countries like this, and it's usually contained, and we know how to handle it now. But it's when you know that it killed 25 million people at one point, you can't help but worry about it a little bit.
Absolutely. And as far as treatment goes, people who are infected with the plague need immediate treatment. They should be given antibiotics within 24 hours, Lewis, to prevent death. There are other treatments as well. People who have had contact with anyone infected by the plague are given antibiotics, and this has been significantly effective in reducing the number of deaths. The first recorded epidemic was back in the Byzantine Empire during the 6th century and was named the Plague of Justinian, after Emperor Justinian I, who was actually infected but was able to survive through extensive treatment back in the 6th century. This is not something that you really want to mess with if you can avoid it.
Yeah, this is definitely something to avoid, and I just hope that the antibiotics continue to work.
Right. Yeah. That's a broader conversation, which we've kind of alluded to a little bit, Lewis, which is the broader concern about the decreased effectiveness of antibiotics. And even though many people may assume that, hey, there are always new antibiotics, it's true, but they all are part of one of three types of antibiotics. And typically these are thought of in groups. So even though there are a lot of brand names of antibiotics, there aren't really that many different types. And we should actually cover that more extensively soon, Lewis.
Yeah, we definitely should. I'm sure there are plenty of experts out there who can give us all sorts of insight into that.
All right, excellent bonus show coming up today. Lewis produces and hosts the bonus show. We will talk about Zipf's Law. We will talk about a women's rights activist demanding a higher female body count. What is that all about? And much more. You get the bonus show the same way that you get all supporter benefits, by going to our website, davidpakman.com, and subscribing. Become a supporter, support this program. We'll be back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Cutting-edge research shows that President Obama causes lightning, cats, and suicide. Find more unbiased research like that at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is Sonia Velez. Sonia, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. You're doing a great thing. And you can join Sonia by signing up at davidpakman.com/membership. Also, remember, the holiday buying season is really ramping up now. We're getting into the heat of it, Lewis. and you can support the show with the shopping you plan to do on Amazon.com. Anytime you're going to shop on Amazon, first go to our website, davidpakman.com, and click on the Amazon banner. Then just do your shopping. No forms to fill out, nothing to do, but you are supporting this program. I actually recommend bookmarking the link and then using it whenever you shop. You're kind of setting it and forgetting it, for lack of a better term. It is Wednesday. It is time for Hatriot Mail, Lewis. Very, very exciting.
Between waving a Gadsden's flag from a highway overpass to drafting George Zimmerman for a 2016 run, a patriot has little time for anything else. But when that annoying little dweeb, David Pakman, really pushes the liberal envelope beyond what a God-fearing teabagger can bear, there's Hatriot Mail. Your brief respite from the unending deluge of liberal bias.
Absolutely, Lewis. I want to play today's Hatriot Mail. This is one that is getting back to, we're getting back to policy, Lewis. This is a very nuanced and well-crafted critique of my policy on national defense. Check this out.
Hey, Pakman. You're the kind of guy that during a firefight with the enemy, you would stand up and say, "We're over here."
Yeah. This is the same tired old nonsense, Lewis, about liberals are weak on defense. Liberals want other countries to invade us. Liberals don't support the troops, even though we're the ones who don't want to send the troops into those pointless wars based on false intelligence for personal political gain of those in power, and instead want to provide them with health care when they come back. We're just so terrible, Lewis, aren't we?
You know, David, this Hatriot, I think, has completely convinced me. I think I'm just going to switch sides on this one.
Yeah. I wonder if anyone has ever heard Hatriot Mail and then said, you know what? I used to disagree with that point of view, but because of that incredibly sovereign, God-fearing, gun-toting Hatriot, I now am switching sides. That would be dramatic. I would want to know about that.
We'd have to get an email on that and then have that one read by our professional.
Okay, the LA Times is reporting on the finalization of the American Airlines and U.S. Airways merger, making them the largest American airline. American Airlines emerging from bankruptcy, closing the merger with U.S. Airways. And they're not only the U.S.'s biggest airline now, they're the biggest airline in the world. The parent company of the parent companies of the two airlines became American Airlines Group Incorporated. The new airline will be based in Fort Worth, Texas. And there is going to be this period, as often is the case when airlines merge, where they continue to operate separately, flights are operated separately, etc. We saw this with the United and Continental merger a couple of years back. Eventually, all of the frequent flyer miles join. The fleets are repainted to match and to be consistent. The flight numbers all match and only represent one airline. There is typically the assumption from those who think critically about these issues, Lewis, that serious industry consolidation is bad for customers and that has very few exceptions. Increased prices due to less competition is kind of an obvious, logical expectation. However, interestingly enough, within the airline industry, that hasn't been the case. As of 2012, the results of a number of mergers that took place within the U.S. airline industry during the last decade, including United and Continental, Delta and Northwest, Southwest, and AirTran. Although does that actually count as a merger? I'm not sure. In any case, there have been a number of these mergers. It only led to a 1.8% increase in the average domestic ticket price per year from 2004 to 2011, which is actually slightly less than inflation. However, we have to explore those numbers a little further. Number one, yes, domestic prices may have risen only slightly, but international routes are where these mergers can have the biggest impact, Lewis, where think about a flight, for example, from the U.S. to Argentina, a flight that I've been on just about every airline for. Very often when these mergers take place, you actually see a reduction in the number of those flights, and the prices of those routes do actually increase significantly. So we have to separate domestic flight tickets and international flight tickets. But there's actually a further issue, which is forgetting for a second about how it affects consumers. Remember the labor implications and how it affects those who work for these airlines. Most of the labor boards did not oppose the American-US Airways merger, and much of that can be for political reasons and for deals that are kind of made behind the scenes, but that has to be a concern here in terms of, do you lose negotiating power as an employee when this happens? Is it better or worse for you day to day as an employee? And we know back during the United Continental merger, I would speak to employees of both airlines regularly at airports, and many of them were not pleased with how they were being treated.
Right, but there was also the potential that many people could have just lost their jobs entirely if one of these airlines failed. So in that way, I suppose a lot of jobs potentially could have been saved. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see how this all resolves before we get angry about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually, next week I'm flying. Oh no, actually I'm not. I thought I was flying on American next week, but I'm not. So I won't be able to do any kind of research on this or talk to anyone, but maybe some other time.
I'm sure you'll find a flight sometime, yeah.
Colin Powell has called for universal health care in the United States. The Puget Sound Business Journal writes that former Secretary of State and longtime Republican Colin Powell is calling for a universal health care solution in the United States. He says, quote, "We are a wealthy enough country with the capacity to make sure that every one of our fellow citizens has access to quality health care. Let's show the rest of the world what our democratic system is all about and how we take care of all our citizens." It's funny because last week, or even earlier this week, I said, Lewis, the U.S. is supposedly the most advanced and best country in the world, and we can't even provide everybody with health care. And I got 10 or 20 emails saying, oh, more evidence that Pakman's a communist. Colin Powell has basically said what I said word for word. He is, I guess, a Republican, although these stories about how Powell is one of the few reasonable Republicans left, I don't know if they're relevant, because if you vote for President Obama and support universal health care, practically speaking, you're not really much of a Republican in today's modern American political system, are you?
Right. I think he, of course, openly stating that he was voting for Obama. And after all of that, you have to assume that the right has probably lost interest in anything Colin Powell has to say.
Well, that's the thing. It's funny because you have individuals. Let's step back for a second, right? We have a political system where certain individuals are trusted because of who they are or taken seriously, and certain individuals are not. So, for example, Sarah Palin is someone that even many Republicans don't really trust because they realize she can barely put together a sentence. She has such a lack of understanding of even the most basic political issues. She just simply doesn't seem competent. However, Colin Powell is someone who for a long, long time was very well respected by the Republican establishment. He went up there and he made that horrible, deceitful case for war in Iraq, and he has faced at least certain repercussions for that, although maybe not what he was deserving of. And instantly, as soon as he says, well, actually, I think President Obama is the better choice over John McCain, or I think President Obama is the better choice over Mitt Romney, and now calling for universal health care, all of a sudden, the right seems not to care too much about what Colin Powell says. It's almost like you've been discredited because you failed a litmus test, so to speak. But I don't think that's unique to the right. I think both sides are pretty quick to write off a longtime insider, so to speak, when on 1, 2, or 3 key issues, they no longer agree with you.
Like Lieberman?
Joe Lieberman's a good example of that. Yeah, but the difference there, I think, well, no, is there a difference? I'm not sure. I mean, certainly from my point of view, Joe Lieberman just went completely off the rails, whereas Colin Powell seems to be coming down to earth and thinking logically. But I do have to try to be open and think about it from the other side. Is there any practical difference between Colin Powell and Joe Lieberman? Well, I think that one difference, Lewis, is that Joe Lieberman started as an elected official helping or working with the other side, so to speak, and abandoning those who elected him. Whereas Colin Powell is not in that position. And in fact, maybe that's why so many people did respect him, because he was kind of the military guy who's been appointed, and he is a professional. And yes, he happens to be a Republican, but we trust him. So I think there is a difference to be pointed out there with Lieberman.
Maybe. I just hope the right actually listens to Colin Powell and starts to not be as afraid of the idea of universal health care as they have been.
All right, let's take a break. Coming up next, I'll talk to constitutional law professor Adam Winkler. There's a controversy already ramping up pre-Super Bowl where the NFL has rejected an ad submitted by a firearm manufacturer named Daniel Defense. We will talk to attorney Adam Winkler about this right after the break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Adam Winkler is a professor of constitutional law at the UCLA School of Law. He's the author of Gunfight, The Battle Over the Right to Bear Arms in America. Adam, great as always to talk to you. We have now a little bit of controversy involving gun advocates and the NFL, which has decided to reject an advertisement submitted by Daniel Defense, which is a gun manufacturer.
It's been a long road getting here. And a lot has changed since I got back. Now this is the center of my world. And my family's safety is my highest priority. I am responsible for their protection. And no one has the right to tell me how to defend them. So I've chosen the most effective tool for the job.
Daniel Defense, defending your nation, defending your home.
Some gun advocates are going as far as saying that they need to boycott the NFL. I want to kind of split our conversation into two parts. The first is First Amendment. We often hear accusations when there are advertisements rejected or views criticized that somehow someone's First Amendment rights are being violated. So let's get that out of the way first. I have a feeling it's the simplest question. Is anyone violating anyone else's First Amendment rights by the NFL rejecting this ad?
No, absolutely not. The First Amendment to the Constitution restrains the government's ability to censor people. It does not relate at all to private parties and private actions. So the NFL is a private entity. It is not a government or state actor, and thus it is not bound by the First Amendment. If you remember your 7th grade civics class, the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Congress has not made any law here. The NFL just has adopted its own policy for its own broadcast.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. Then the issue becomes, is the NFL making decisions about advertisements consistently based on what their policy is? So what does the NFL and or Fox, which is going to be the broadcaster of the Super Bowl this year, what does the policy say about what type of content will or will not be accepted within advertisements?
Well, the NFL imposes on Fox a very detailed list of prohibited advertising categories, a list of different kinds of things that the NFL does not want advertised on the Super Bowl. And one of those things relevant to this case is a restriction on advertisements for firearms, ammunitions, or other deadly weapons. And Daniel's Defense is a gun manufacturer. Daniel's Defense is arguing that they fit under an exception to this policy, however, because while the rule does restrict any advertisers from advertising firearms or ammunition or other weapons, it does provide that there's an exception if you're a brick and mortar store that sells other items other than firearms. So think of a sporting goods store that happens to sell firearms, they can still advertise on the Super Bowl. And Daniel's defense claims that they have a brick and mortar store that sells things other than firearms, including branded merchandise like sweatshirts and t-shirts and mugs. And they're arguing that that was what was really being advertised and not the firearms.
Okay, so you could make the argument that if Walmart can advertise on the Super Bowl, which sells a bunch of stuff, including firearms, then Daniel's defense should be allowed to advertise because they sell firearms among a long list of other things. So looking at that policy, it may not be consistent.
It may not be consistent, but there's another element of the policy that may be at issue here too. So another feature that the NFL has in its prohibited advertising policy is that you cannot advertise for social causes or issue advertising. They basically don't want political ads on the Super Bowl because they don't want to alienate any of their viewers. And it was really interesting, although the ad itself does not appear to be an ad that is one for a social cause. It's really features a handsome young husband coming home and seeing his family and saying, I'm going to protect them in any way I can. But the owner of Daniel Defense came out and said that this ad was about exercising their First Amendment rights to support the Second Amendment. Well, then it starts to sound like they're taking sides in a political issue and one that the NFL probably is right to avoid endorsing.
Yeah, so there it becomes very, very clear because they're being completely upfront that this is an ad designed to get people thinking and talking about the Second Amendment, which is a very political issue. The question then becomes, is it still a consistent policy, or let me phrase it a different way? Should you only be looking as the NFL at the content of the ad when making these decisions, or is it fair to consider what the creator of the ad has said about their intention?
Well, I think it's probably fair for the NFL to consider all information with regards to its policy and its proposed ads. Now, granted, if you see this ad, David, you'll see it's a very tame ad. It's really kind of boring for a Super Bowl ad, actually, just this guy coming home and seeing his family and hugging his child while the voiceover talks about importance of family and defending your family.
Yeah.
But it's pretty tame comparison to so many advertisements we see on the Super Bowl that are extremely violent, that have a lot of overtly sexual material, even though the NFL policy warns against overtly sexual material. So I can't blame those in the firearms industry for saying there's at least a hint of hypocrisy here to say, well, you can't talk about defending your home, but if you have a crotch-biting dog, you can put it in your beer ad, and it can do whatever kind of violence it wants.
Yeah, and then this really kind of gets us to the broader societal question, which we've been talking about since Janet Jackson's nipple popped out on the Super Bowl, which is what really is good or bad for, usually it's children, right, that are discussed. What's good or bad for the children to see? Are kids' lives ruined if they see a breast or a crotch bitten or someone being shot in either a cartoonish or non-cartoonish way? And when we look at it from that point of view, it seems like there are these kind of nebulous or gray areas within society for what is acceptable and what isn't during primetime TV.
Well, that's absolutely right. And although I'm a fan of NFL football, I have to say that probably the most hazardous things for kids to watch during a football game is the game itself,
right?
Which is an incredibly violent game, and we're finding out causes so many more devastating injuries. And indeed, the NFL has good cause to be concerned, even though it's the most profitable sports league in the country by far. The number of people who are signing up for Pop Warner, which is like Little League football, has declined about 10% over the last 2 years. And parents are increasingly worried about the violence that comes with the NFL. But for the gun rights people, their issue is really they see the NFL as being consistent in one sense, consistently anti-gun, and
right.
that they see this ad as part of a larger pattern of hostility by the NFL to gun owners.
Well, it seems to me, and you tell me if you agree, that this one is not going to go back in favor of those who are pushing for the Daniel Defense ad to run. It seems like it's just not going to happen.
It's not clear to me even that Daniel Defense really wants to run this ad. It's extremely expensive to run a Super Bowl ad, and they wouldn't be the first ones to submit an ad rather cheaply to the NFL and try to make a little free publicity on the rejection of the ad by the NFL. Alex Jones, who's a big gun rights advocate who went on a notorious anti-gun rant during the Pierce Morgan show after Newtown, has really called for this boycott of the anti-liberty NFL. But, the NFL may have been good at taking down Barack Obama's proposal and defeating candidates in Colorado and elsewhere, but I think they've really finally met their match with the NFL. Americans love their football even more than they love their guns.
All right, Adam Winkler, professor of constitutional law at the UCLA School of Law. Check out his book, Gunfight, The Battle Over the Right to Bear Arms in America. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks for having me.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Another cake shop owner is refusing to make a cake for a gay wedding. Mediaite is reporting on this. The owner of a Colorado cake shop who refused to make a cake for a same-sex wedding has been ordered by a judge to comply with the gay couple's order. The cake shop owner says he's going to refuse to comply, and he is willing to even go to prison, Lewis, to make his statement. This is Jack Phillips, owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop. He was interviewed on Fox and Friends by Elizabeth Hasselbeck. This interview is so sickening on so many levels. Number one, the guy, it's sickening because of what the guy's doing. Okay, that's number one. But number two, the entire interview, they bring on the guy's attorney and they talk to the guy, is framed as if this guy is some kind of heroic patriot standing up for his religion or something like that. Here's a clip from the interview. First the lawyer, then our friend Jack Phillips, the actual baker who's refusing to make a lesbian wedding cake. Check it out.
Indeed. The important thing for your viewers to know is that the First Amendment, indeed the U.S. Constitution, gives every American the right to live and work according to their beliefs. If the government can force you to violate your beliefs under the threat of a jail sentence, there's really no freedom they can't take away, Elizabeth.
Jack, are you willing to go to jail for your religious beliefs here?
If that's what it takes, I guess I would be. I don't plan on giving up my religious beliefs. It's not just like I've chosen this team or that team. This is who I am. It's what I believe.
What a hard-hitting interview, Lewis. Elizabeth Hasselbeck interviewing a bigot as if it's some kind of incredible moral stand the guy is taking. We have a step back for a second, ladies and gentlemen. A major so-called news channel is appeasing and cheerleading a bigot as some kind of sovereign hero standing up for the bigotry that is in his sacred texts.
Yeah, and the attorney makes this out to be a First Amendment issue,
Yeah.
as usual. And I mean, what she says is, well, if he, citing religious beliefs, they basically say that if he's not allowed to deny service to these people based on his religious beliefs, then it's a violation of the First Amendment, of course. But if his religious beliefs were, say, like some Christians think that they should be able to kill gays, I think the attorney would probably draw a line there. So where do you draw the line?
Yeah, they've basically turned bigotry into principles and moral action and morality. Imagine for a second to think about the double standard at Fox News who just wants to cheerlead this. Imagine a gay bakery shop owner refusing to bake a cake for a Christian family to celebrate Christmas because the gay cake baker finds the Christian family's views oppressive, discriminatory, and hostile to LGBT Americans. That would be cited in Sarah Palin's book as part of the War on Christmas. That would be in Bill O'Reilly's Talking Points memo about the War on Christmas. It would be not the subject of a cheerleading interview by Elizabeth Hasselbeck on Fox and Friends. That we can absolutely guarantee.
And I wonder if they would ever, defend the actions of a Muslim baker,
Right.
who decides to do something like this based on religious beliefs.
It's just incredible, and the level to which Fox and Friends is stooping is just absolutely sickening. Here's some numbers to put corporate subsidies and corporate welfare in perspective for you. Commondreams.org and whitehouse.gov's 2012 tax receipt numbers show us that if you make $50,000 a year, you pay $247 in taxes towards defense, $4 in taxes towards FEMA, $23 for unemployment insurance, $37 towards the food stamp program, $7 for welfare, $44 to retirement and disability benefits for government workers, $235 a year towards Medicare, and $4,000 towards corporate subsidies. That's compared to $597 total, all that other stuff that I mentioned. Seeing the numbers like this should really make people more aware and outraged about the spending priorities of their government.
Right. And when you think about it, how many of the $4,000 that you're spending on corporate subsidies, what percentage of that is going to subsidize corporations who are recording billion-dollar profits and in reality have no need for government subsidy?
That would be an interesting way to break it down further. So yes, $4,000 in total corporate subsidies, but how much to corporations that had zero tax liability at the end of the year? Is it $500 of the $4,000? Is it $1,000 of the $4,000? I don't know. I think that this is really good, Lewis, because it just breaks it down where you say, oh, okay, well, $4,000, that means out of every paycheck, every single paycheck, I'm paying about $75 to subsidize big corporations that already have an incredible number of tax advantages that I don't have. It's quite disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good chance that all of us are just basically putting money directly into the pockets of CEOs and execs for these giant corporations.
I don't think that we're basically doing that. I think it's clear that we are, and people need to understand that. And if they don't understand that, it's going to be pretty tough to make any change happen. And we'll kind of be following up about this tomorrow with economist Richard Wolff, one of our favorite guests, who will be on with us tomorrow. We have a voicemail line. You can call it any time of day. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P, 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is a voicemail responding to our story last week about the Paul Walker assassination conspiracy theories. Let's listen.
Hey, Dave. About the conspiracy theories surrounding Paul Walker's death, I think things like this really prove that conspiracy theories, or just the tendency to believe them, it's just a slave mentality. And what I mean by that is that these people, I mean, if you're living in a world in which something of that nature, something that in the long run is kind of so petty, if these things are being controlled by the elites, by some sort of shadow government or whatever the explanation is, then they have no control over their lives. There is no way that they can have any autonomy, and it's really sad. I mean, it's a hopeless way to think.
It kind of is. Yeah, it is interesting. If you do believe that the government is so in control, you basically believe you yourself to be a slave. That is true. You simply have no control. The government at any time will decide what happens to you. And the sad thing, Lewis, is some conspiracy theorists do believe that that is the case, that you are basically a slave, whether it's because you are being forced to pay taxes or whether it's because the government can just decide to off you whenever they want. So it is quite sad and a very interesting point. Also, another voicemail about Sarah Palin's brutal assault on the English language. Listen to this.
Hey, David. Hey, Lewis. This is Josh Gaffney from Michigan calling again. Was listening on the website, and I just wanted to let you know that you guys are definitely right. Sarah Palin will definitely not stop her run-on sentences and absolute demolition of the English language until she's wearing a David Pakman shirt. So.
Right.
If I had the money, to be honest with you, I would pay for her David Pakman shirt. But
yeah, I think I'm not sure we're going to see Sarah Palin wearing a David Pakman Show T-shirt anytime soon. It seems pretty unlikely to me, but you could be wearing one of those shirts or hoodies, davidpakman.com/gear. We've got a really great bonus show planned today. We'll talk about a women's rights activist demanding a higher female body count. We will talk about Zip's Law and much more. davidpakman.com/membership. There's a whole other show happening every single day. If you're not getting it, you really should. davidpakman.com/membership. See you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.